Somewhere along your journey of awakening, maybe after a major spiritual insight or a personal breakdown, you felt something shift. You saw the illusion, the patterns, the noise, and then silence. At first it was powerful, even empowering, but slowly that sense of meaning just vanished. Not overnight, not dramatically, quietly, like your soul turned down the volume on life and forgot to turn it back up. You stopped chasing, you stopped caring, not in a reckless way, just in that quiet, existential sigh kind of way. The question started whispering louder. Why do I feel so numb now that I finally see the truth? There's a strange paradox here. We expect spiritual awakening to ignite our passion. But for so many, especially the deeply introspective types, the empaths, the seekers, it does the opposite. It empties us. I remember talking to a friend, super bright, spiritually attuned, obsessed with all the right books, Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. Then she had a massive awakening after a dark night of the soul. She got it. She said she saw through the illusion of identity, ego, chasing external success. And yet 2 months later, she was staring at her ceiling, barely able to get out of bed. She told me, "I used to cry over not achieving enough. Now I don't care whether I do anything at all. I thought awakening would light me up, not leave me like this." Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, hinted at this post-awakening fog years ago. He didn't talk in trendy spiritual terms, but he understood what happens when the unconscious becomes conscious. Jung said, "Enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That sounds beautiful until you realize what it means. Awakening isn't the end. It's the beginning of a psychological death, the death of who you thought you were. The structures that gave your life meaning, goals, careers, relationships, even your sense of time, all collapse. But here's the catch Jung would point out. Your ego isn't gone. It's confused. It lost its map. And without a new map, motivation disappears. So it's not that you're depressed or lost motivation. You're just in limbo. You've woken up from something, but you haven't woken up into something else yet. But here's where it gets fascinating and deeply misunderstood. What you're feeling right now isn't failure. It's not depression or anxiety in the clinical sense. It's something ancient and sacred. Jung actually warned that our modern world avoids this phase at all costs, this sacred pause, this void, this in-between. He believed it was essential for true individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self. But no one tells you about this part, do they? And that's exactly what we're going to unravel next. What's really happening in your psyche after awakening, and how this loss of motivation might be the biggest spiritual upgrade you've ever experienced, if you understand it right. Before we continue, if you're someone who loves expanding your mind and exploring the deeper layers of life, make sure to subscribe to Fractal Wisdom. This channel exists to make the invisible visible and support those navigating the weird and wild path of awakening. So if you've been floating in that post-awakening fog, wondering where your spark went, no, you're not crazy. You're going through a psychological shift most people can't name. A change so deep it doesn't just tweak your thinking, it reprograms your operating system. All the goals you used to chase, the to-do lists, the 5-year plans, the hustle culture playlists, they don't move you anymore. Not because you're failing, but because your motivation system itself is collapsing. And Carl Jung saw this coming long before it became a trending topic on social media. Let's break this down. For most of your life, your motivation came from your ego identity, the me you thought you were. You wanted to prove yourself, be seen, be successful, be loved. That's not a bad thing. It's just how human development works. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. But the awakening process strips the mask. Suddenly, you're not trying to be liked, you're not trying to win the game, because you see the game, and that's where it gets weird. Without the mask, your old goals don't fit anymore. They were tailored to a version of you that doesn't exist. So now you're like a character in a play who stepped off stage and can't figure out what their lines are anymore. That's why you feel unmotivated. You didn't lose drive. You outgrew the fuel that powered it. Carl Jung believed that we're not here to serve the ego. We're here to integrate it, to align it with something bigger. He named this process individuation, the journey of transforming from a fragmented identity into a whole, unified self. Not the small self that wants praise, but the self that transcendent, the soul-level center inside you that connects to everything. And this self doesn't care about status or approval or even clarity. It's here to express truth. So once the awakening happens, your psyche starts recalibrating. It begins rejecting anything fake, forced, or ego-based. That includes jobs, relationships, ambitions, and even your carefully crafted dream board from 2021. That's why people often describe awakening as both freeing and disorienting. But Jung warned, if we stop here, we get stuck. Some people awaken and fall into the trap of spiritual bypassing, convincing themselves that nothing matters, that it's all just illusion. So they disconnect, float and numb out. They confuse detachment with disengagement. But the self wants something different. It wants to live through you. It wants to bring heaven into this human body. It doesn't reject the world. It redefines your role in it. In order to step into that, you've got to go through a weird middle phase Jung described perfectly, and few people recognize while they're in it. There's a phase after awakening that almost no one talks about. It's not glamorous, and it doesn't get thousands of likes. It doesn't look like meditating in Bali or writing profound Instagram quotes. It looks like this: sitting in silence, unable to explain yourself, while the world keeps rushing by. Carl Jung would say you're not lost, you're in between. You've disidentified from the ego, but haven't yet found a new way to live from the self. This space is not a failure, it's a rite of passage. But in our hyper-productive world, stillness gets misdiagnosed as laziness. Pause gets mistaken for paralysis. So you judge yourself. And that judgment blocks the very energy your soul is trying to call back. Jung had a term for this psychological pause. He called it enantiodromia, the process where things flip into their opposite. When you awaken, your inner pendulum swings from ego-driven striving to soul-level stillness. You go from "I must do everything" to "Why do anything?" And this swing is sacred. It's how balance is restored. In myth and ancient teachings, this is the hermit phase, the death before rebirth. It's the moment the caterpillar turns to soup inside the cocoon. Not a butterfly yet. Not a bug anymore. Just goo. And yeah, goo doesn't get stuff done. It doesn't hustle. It dissolves. This is where the ego panics. It wants action, identity, and direction. But the self is whispering, let go. I'm building something deeper. Here's where most modern spirituality kind of skips the hard stuff. It teaches, just follow your joy, or high vibes only. And while intention and energy matter, Carl Jung would tell you, if you try to skip the darkness, you skip the gold. Jung believed shadow integration, facing the repressed, uncomfortable parts of you, is essential for becoming whole, not optional, not extra credit. It's the core curriculum of being a human soul. This sacred nothingness you feel is where the unconscious finally has space to rise. You're not failing, you're metabolizing, and your psyche is incredibly wise. It will stall your motivation, your drive, even your access to clarity, on purpose. So you're forced to feel, witness, and reclaim what you've buried. That's the real work. And here's the beautiful twist. When you stop resisting the void, something strange starts to happen. Motivation begins to return, but it feels different this time. It's not anxious. It's not performative. It's not hustle. It's something older and something quieter. A kind of soul-led movement that feels like remembering instead of chasing. Jung called this the emergence of the self. Not as a concept, but as a living inner compass. So you've walked through the void. You've felt the silence, the stillness, the deep pause. And now something new is starting to stir inside you. Not a lightning bolt and not fireworks. More like a quiet inner pull. Not to go back to your old life, but to build a new one. This is where the self begins to speak. Not in words, but in nudges, in resonance, in what Carl Jung called the symbolic life. He believed that once the ego has surrendered and the unconscious is integrated, we become capable of living from a place deeper than personality. That's when life stops being about survival and becomes about meaning. And here's an unexpected fact. It's often beautifully ordinary. When the self leads, you don't hustle, you respond. You're not motivated by fear of missing out. You're guided by what feels aligned. You no longer chase clarity. You recognize it when it arrives. Living from the self doesn't mean you'll always feel motivated in the traditional sense. You might still feel waves of fatigue, confusion, even grief. That's being human. But what you won't feel is that constant sense of inner betrayal, the feeling of dragging yourself through a life that doesn't fit. Instead, you might start to notice you're drawn to create, even when no one's watching. You say no to things that don't resonate, even if they look good on paper. You start following your curiosity, not your checklist. You choose peace over performance. This is the new fuel. It's not adrenaline, it's alignment. Jung called this living symbolically, not in fantasy, but with soul, where you begin to trust your inner imagery, dreams, synchronicities, gut feelings, as guidance. So what does this look like in real life? Sometimes it's as simple as asking different questions. Instead of, "What should I do?" ask, "What's quietly calling me?" Instead of, "What's the plan?" ask, "Where is life nudging me?" Instead of, "How can I prove myself?" ask, "What feels honest?" You begin to participate with life instead of trying to dominate it. And this doesn't mean giving up ambition, it means transforming it. Ambition becomes devotion to truth, to presence and growth. And the irony is, that kind of energy gets things done way more effectively than ego ever could. But now it's sustainable. Now it's soul-powered. This is the self's motivation, not to impress, but to express. And it often leads you to create, serve, heal, teach, and build. Not because you should, but because your whole being says, yes. So if you've been feeling like your spark is gone after awakening, it's the old fire that burned down so that you could find a deeper flame, one that doesn't flicker when external winds blow. Carl Jung didn't promise an easy path. And if you're here, listening to this, you're already walking that path. It's not about getting back your old motivation. It's about discovering a new one, rooted in wholeness, not performance. This isn't the end of your awakening. It's the beginning of your becoming. If this spoke to you, if it helped you name something you've been silently navigating, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what this journey has felt like for you. And if you want more content like this, where we explore psychology, soul, and self-awareness in ways that actually make sense for real life, make sure to subscribe to Fractal Wisdom. Because awakening isn't the end of the story. It's where the real story begins.